Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the Daily News Analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the UPSC examination point of view. So let's start our today's discussion by taking the important articles which feature in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. And let's take up our first article for the day, which reads, Upholding the Autonomy of the Election Commission. Now, this article appears in the editorial section of the newspaper and talks about the recent issues surrounding the Election Commission of India. The issue and the topic we have also discussed quite a few times in our previous sessions, and this editorial article pertains to that issue, and we'll try to understand what exactly is the author trying to say and what are its problems associated with the Election Commission of India and what method is he suggesting to solve it. So let's understand first the issue or the case that was in Supreme Court. So what is the context for this particular article? That for the past 2 months, the Supreme Court had been hearing the case with respect to Election Commission of India and the procedure of appointments, especially the election commissioners and the chief election commissioner. The procedure for their appointment was discussed, and consequently the topic of independence of the election commission was deliberated in the Supreme Court, and now the Supreme Court has reserved its judgment and it will soon give its judgment probably in the first week of the new year, January. So in this backdrop, we'll understand what is the issue surrounding the Election Commission of India. So we have taken this discussion already, and we had seen that how Election Commission is a constitutional body for India, which actually is the body tasked with the job of overseeing the elections in the country, especially the central elections and the state elections. So we had seen the procedure of appointment of the chief election commissioner and the election commissioner in this election commission. So we know that the executive under the seal of the president is the body which appoints the election commissioners and chief election commissioner, and the chief election commissioners have a fixed term of 6 years or up to the age of 65 years of their age can be the tenure for the particular chief election commissioner. Same is given for the election commissioner, but how much tenure they should have, that is not mentioned. And this is the procedure with respect to appointment, and the powers with respect to these election commissioners and chief election commissioners is also enlisted in the constitution, where they have several powers and they have enough protections mentioned in the constitution. But there are certain drawbacks with these election commission provisions in the constitution, and those drawbacks are that the constitution is silent about the procedure for removal of the two election commissioners. So the constitution talks about the removal of the chief election commissioner, whereby an impeachment process similar for the removal of the president or the Supreme Court judge is adopted. That procedure is required for the chief election commissioner, but how the election commissioner would be removed, that provision is not there in the constitution. It only provides for removal of the recommendation of the chief election commissioner. Second is, the constitution has neither prescribed the qualification of the members of the ECI nor specified the terms of the members of the ECI. So as we can see, there is a big problem with respect to the provisions when it comes to election commissioners. No procedure is given for how they would be appointed, no qualification is given for them, neither is there term of those members specified in the constitution, and it has not debarred the retiring election commissioners from any further appointment by the government. And therefore, the executive enjoys the power to make appointments that affect the ECI's independence and make the process of appointing electing commissioners partial and biased. This is the take because of which the case went to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court will now deliberate on these crucial issues and try to answer this question as to how and what should be the appointment process for especially the election commissioners, their qualification as well as their removal. So this is the gist because of which there is a problem with respect to the election commission in the Supreme Court. Now, what does the author say? The author introduces us by saying that we have 3 pillars of democracy. We all know them. One is the legislature, second is the executive, and third is the judiciary. Here, the author talks about a 4th pillar as well. That we all know that sometimes even media is called as the 4th pillar, but this is not that pillar. This is with respect to a different aspect of the 4th pillar, and he says that there should be a 4th pillar as well, because there are certain rights, basic rights and fundamental rights, that in order to realize those rights, we need certain separate institutions, because a lot of times the rights are to be taken from the state itself. So there has to be an organization or an institution which stands little different than the state, parallel to the state, and is not part of the executive or the government. That is why many of the basic rights and guarantees that we enjoy cannot be effective without an infrastructure of implementation, right? So I hope we are understanding this as to why the fourth pillar needs to be there, because whatever rights are enshrined in the constitution, which the legislature is set to legislate upon and executive is supposed to provide for, there has to be another institution which checks that these institutions are working correctly, and the rights which are to be given by these institutions, those are implemented correctly. So he takes an example of the right to information. Now we all know that seeking the information from the government and government agencies is the right of every citizen, and this has been touted as the right to information. And this, we know that in the current scheme of our polity, is done through the RTI Act, the Right to Information Act. But can we say that without a proper infrastructure, this particular right to information can be realized for us citizens? It is very difficult. If there is enough infrastructure is not there for this right, it's just a paper guarantee. We cannot be realized with this guarantee. So infrastructure for implementation is required for certain rights. So with respect to right to information, what kind of infrastructure do we have? We have the Information Commission and the Information Commissioners who are appointed under this commission. These commissions need to be adequately staffed, funded, which will oversee the on-ground enforcement of the right to information, compel the laid-back public institutions to release public information, adjudicate on disputes. So they have a host of functions which are a mix of judicial as well as administrative functions. So this is the importance that we can establish of these fourth pillar institutions, which are there to make sure that the implementation or the realization of the rights that are enshrined in the constitution is actually seen through and taken place, and it is not impedimented by these three pillars of the democracy. This is the role of the fourth pillar, and one can say that the Election Commission of India also forms a significant part of the fourth pillar. That is why it has been kept as a constitutional body under the constitution, and it enjoys a lot of powers. But similar with the case of Information Commission, the author takes the example of this commission and says that the appointment of commissioners under the Information Commission is a very contested issue. Why? Because the executive has amended the Information Commission Act, and the power to appoint persons as information commissioners totally lies with the executive. And whenever this happens, we all can assume, and the author cites that there is enough evidence to show that whenever there is an appointment power with respect to the executive for some organization, there would be chances for partiality and bias, because the person who is appointed is at the mercy of the government or the executive who is appointing him or her. So this reeks of impartiality, and this causes a great dent on the independence of that functionary or the institution. So this is the example he takes, and similarly dives down into the Election Commission. So we need to understand that fourth branch institutions need to be functionally independent from the political executive. This is because they are the vehicles for implementing rights against the executive. This is the importance of these fourth branch institutions. So he then takes the example of what are the foreign countries doing with respect to this conflict, where such institutions are there which have to be present in order to realize the rights. So he takes the example of South African and Kenyan constitutions, who have recently dedicated constitutional provisions for fourth branch institutions such as Human Rights Commission, election commissions, calling these institutions as integrity institutions and requiring them to be independent. Now one can say that even we have done this. We have given some fourth branch institutions certain constitutional status, right? So even we have institutions such as Election Commission, CAG or the Comptroller and Auditor General, the Public Service Commissions. All of these institutions are instances of fourth branch institutions given constitutional protection in the Indian Constitution. But the author says that the appointment process of these institutions is a very critical point to legislate upon. where the process should be involving multiple stakeholders from different wings of the state. So one solution that the author tries to say is that the appointment process for these institutions is very important, and their appointment procedure should have multiple stakeholders from different wings of the state. That is why we see a lot of important bodies having appointment committees which have members from the opposition. So the leader of the opposition is a part of it, the members from judiciary or experts is a part of it, and when we have multiple stakeholders on the appointment panel, we can ensure that the appointment process is either is relatively impartial and there are multiple stakeholders giving their view on it, so that no one particular institution can apply their monopoly over it. So this is the solution that it suggests, and this is where the negative part of our Indian constitution comes in with respect to the ECI, that there are powers and protection given to the election commissioners and chief election commissioners once appointed, but before appointment the procedure that should be there, the qualifications, that since is not given very clearly in the constitution, that becomes a negative point where there is no autonomy on appointments and the power to appoint lies solely with the executive, and hence arises the power of the impartiality principle. So this is the state of the overseas examples and what India has in terms of its provisions. So now what can be the way forward with this? Since the Supreme Court is also going to give its judgment in early week of January, the author says that it should be remembered that no constitutional democracy in the world allows the political executive sole power to staff a body as important to sustaining democracy as an election commission. So first of all, he says that it must be made clear that the appointment process for such important institutions should not be left totally with the executive, and it should have some aspect of multi-stakeholder participation. Therefore, appointment process involve the government, opposition, independent experts, judicial experts in a manner that no one center of power has dominance or a veto. And therefore, so what can the court do then? Because this is in fact a matter of legislation, because if this is such a intricate issue, it's some issue which the legislature should act on and make a parliamentary act on. So what can the court do in this? The author feels that what the court can do is put in place certain interim guidelines, which means that since until the time the law takes shape, certain interim guidelines can be framed by the court, but leaves a more permanent structural solution up to the legislature. It is for the court to decide how best that might be achieved, but the guiding principles at all times must be functional and effective independence from the executive from the moment of appointment to the retirement and then beyond. This is the gist that should be followed whenever we are dealing with the issue of independence for these fourth branch institutions. So this was our discussion on this topic, and with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article reads 3 more sites added to the tentative list of UNESCO. Now, we've taken this article because it talks about 3 unique heritage sites that have been added to the tentative list of UNESCO. Now, we keep hearing about the World Heritage Sites, those come under UNESCO. So, what are these World Heritage Sites? What exactly is the benefit that a site gets when it gets tagged as a World Heritage Site? What role does UNESCO play? And what are these 3 new sites? Because we know that from the examination perspective, whenever certain new historical sites are in news, that's where UPSC focuses upon. So that is why these sites become important for us. So what is this article all about? Let's understand. What has happened? Unakoti, basically, what has happened is that Gujarat's Varnagar town, the iconic Sun Temple at Modhera, and the rock-cut sculptures of Unakoti, these 3 sites, which is in Unakoti, which is in Tripura, have been added to the tentative list of UNESCO's World Heritage Sites. What do we mean by tentative list? A tentative list is an inventory of those properties which each state party intends to consider for nomination. And with these 3 sites, India now has 52 sites on UNESCO's tentative list. This shows the richness of Indian heritage and architecture, where we have a lot of sites in our tentative list itself. So this is the gist with respect to why the article is featuring. Now let's understand about what is UNESCO, or United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. This is that part of United Nations which deals with educational, scientific and cultural aspects of the society. So it takes care of all those initiatives which are educationally, scientifically and culturally important. That is why it delves into these World Heritage Sites and the tags associated with it. It was formed in 1945 and established with an aim to promote world peace and security through international cooperation in 5 key program areas, that is education, natural sciences, social or human sciences, culture and communication or information. These are the key areas which the UNESCO works upon, and its activities have just expanded over the years, where when we talk about especially the World Heritage Sites, in aids in the translation and dissemination of world literature, assists in the establishment and protection of these World Heritage Sites of cultural and natural importance, works to bridge the global digital divide and amongst other works as well. So this is the UNESCO's mandate. Now what are the World Heritage Sites then? What do we mean by these sites? Whenever certain heritage sites get the tag of World Heritage Sites, these sites have been designated by as having outstanding universal value under the Convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage of 1972. This convention provides a framework for international cooperation in preserving and protecting cultural treasures and natural areas throughout the world. And whenever a site gets tagged as a heritage site, there can be different categories under which it gets tagged. So one is cultural heritage, next is natural heritage, and the third category is of a mixed heritage, which is a mix of culture and natural sciences. So the cultural heritage sites include historic buildings and town sites, important archaeological sites and works of monumental sculpture or painting. Or the natural heritage sites would have all the important biodiversity areas, those natural areas that have excellent ecological and evolutionary processes and certain important species as well. So India has total 40 World Heritage Sites, including 32 cultural, 7 natural and 1 mixed site. Can you tell me in the comment box which is that one mixed site which India has in its World Heritage Site list? Right? So now let's come to the crux of today's article. What are these 3 sites which have been put in the tentative list? First is the Sun Temple at Modhera. This Modhera is in Gujarat. This is the picture of the Sun Temple, where we can see that there are 3 prominent sculptures in this, where one is the Kund that is visible, second is the hall that is there in this temple, and another is the more deeper hall which is there from the main hall. So this is the Sun Temple, and of course it is dedicated to the sun god. So it enjoys the same significance as other 2 well-known sun temples is Kashmir and Orissa, that is in Konark. This was built in the 1026 to 27 CE, or after the birth of the Christ, during the reign of Bhima I of the Chalukya dynasty. The temple description states that it is built in Maru Gurjar architectural style. This Maru Gurjar architecture is the style of the West Indian temple architecture that originated in Gujarat and Rajasthan from the 11th to 13th centuries under the Chalukya dynasty. It consists of the main temple shrine, which is known as the Garbhagriha, a hall and an outer hall or assembly hall, and a kund or a sacred pool. This is the main structure of this Sun Temple. The next monument which we have was the Vadnagar town. This whole town holds such ancient importance that the whole town is being added to the tentative list. This is a very historic town which had continuous habitation for more than 2700 years. So the speciality of this town is that it has had or seen continuous habitation for more than 2700 years. That is why there are various monuments in this town which are important, and even now the town is seeing a lot of excavations done and the layers being uncovered. This is the second site. Then the third site is the Unakoti rock sculptures. This is located in the northeastern region of Tripura, is known as the ancient holy place associated with Shaiva worship. So this place is known for Shaiva worship, and the place has many rock cut sculptures much like these, which signify traditions and paintings related to Shiva and Shaivite architecture. This is a massive gallery set in a forested area displaying number of towering low relief images in unique style making it a masterpiece of human creative genius. This is the gist and important aspects with respect to these sites, and we come to the end of today's discussion with this, and we'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles from the newspaper. Thank you.